Well, good Monday morning, everybody. It sure is great to be back home in Santa Cruz after 10 days in Japan on a mission trip. I'm going to be talking more about that this coming weekend. Don't miss that. There's some very exciting things that happened, but I loved it. Thank you for the prayers. And I also love being in the weekend services at TLC this weekend. If you were there, you saw we had 29 people baptized in our services this weekend. So exciting. People are coming to Christ. Lives are changing. Rejoice in that. Well, this weekend, Mark continued our series in 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter, and he talked about how the description of love in 1 Corinthians 13 includes a list of what love is not. For example, we read that love is not rude in verse 5. Now, the Greek phrase could literally be translated, does not act unbecomingly, or does not act inappropriately. You could put it this way. Love has good manners. Love says please. Love says thank you. Love says excuse me. Love says may I. Love is not rude. Now, how relevant is that? Rudeness is having a moment in today's culture. We live in what columnist Merrill Marco in the Wall Street Journal calls a renaissance of rudeness. Public behavior, public words that were unthinkable just a few years ago are now common from politicians, celebrities, social media influencers who are spectacularly rude and crude in ways that would probably get them fired if they were at most jobs. But for them, they do it because it gets them attention. But rudeness is contagious. If you expose your mind to those kinds of people, their rude and crude behavior will rub off on you. And you'll start to think it's so funny or acceptable to be rude. But 1 Corinthians 13 says this kind of rudeness is the opposite of love. Why? Well, as somebody said, the ill-mannered person is communicating that it's all about me, and I don't care what you think. So yeah, we live in a rude culture, but you know what this means? Courtesy stands out. I'll never forget being in Senegal, a country where Christians are in the small minority, and one of the Muslim people told me there that the greatest witness that Christians have in Senegal is how courteous they are, especially how kind Christian husbands are to their wives. That stood out, according to him, in their culture. That gave Christians credibility. And in our culture, too. You know, Christians tell me sometimes that they're scared of being a Christian witness at work or at school. But you know what? When you are simply not rude, it will mark you as different. When you are just not rude, it will impact others. It'll bring glory to God. So look for specific ways to be courteous, to be polite today. I was at a grocery outlet the other day, knowing I would be talking about this in a Devo this week, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be polite and courteous. And an older guy rolled up pushing a shopping cart, and I offered him cuts in the checkout line. Sir, you go on ahead of me. He said, oh, thank you. Now, I didn't recognize him. Then later in the parking lot, I noticed he was struggling to put his groceries in the trunk of his car because he had a walker. And so I offered to help him load his groceries. And after all of that, he said, well, Pastor Renee, I'm sure glad to see that you practice what you preach. And then he said, you know, I haven't been to church in a few years, but now I'll consider coming back. And we got into a longer conversation. So you just never know. Be courteous, not rude. And watch as doors open for you today.